The sun clung stubbornly to the sky, spreading golden light across the quiet neighborhood as Malik Johnson walked home from basketball practice. He was 14, wiry from long hours on the court, and carried his gym bag slung casually over one shoulder. Earbuds nestled in his ears, he hummed softly to himself, each step measured, his eyes shifting between the cracked pavement and the occasional passing car. His world in that moment was small, uncomplicated, just a boy with sore muscles, an empty stomach, and thoughts of his mother's cooking. Yet as he turned onto a quieter street, the hum of a police cruiser shattered that ordinary rhythm. Officer Bradley Stone, a man with 20 years of service and a reputation for authority worn like armor, scanned the neighborhood from behind the wheel. His gaze landed on Malik, a solitary black teenager walking briskly. Suspicion sharpened in Stone's eyes, suspicion born not from evidence but from prejudice. With the ease of habit, he pulled to the curb, rolled down his window, and barked an order. Malik, startled, tugged one earbud free. His voice, polite though nervous, answered, "Yes, sir?" Stone's eyes narrowed. He demanded identification, asking where Malik was going, why he was there, his tone clipped and accusatory. Malik shifted uneasily, his fingers tightening on the strap of his bag. He explained he had come from practice, his school's name embroidered on the jersey peeking from his bag as proof. But Stone's mind was already closed. He stepped out of the cruiser, the weight of his authority pressing forward in every stride. To him, Malik's explanation was defiance, the slight tremor in his voice was guilt, and the simple act of standing still became resistance. "Put the bag down," Stone ordered. Malik obeyed, setting it carefully on the ground. The officer's eyes raked across the boy's frame, searching for threats that weren't there. When Malik, blinded by confusion, took half a step backward, the space between them seemed to stretch into something dangerous. Stone's face hardened. "Stop resisting," he barked, though Malik's hands were raised in a plea of surrender. His voice cracked as he repeated, "I'm not doing anything. Please, I'm just going home." The words did not matter. The tension spiraled, feeding Stone's bias, until action replaced reason. He unclipped the canister from his belt and in one fluid motion, pressed the trigger. A stream of burning liquid shot forward, striking Malik's face with violent precision. The boy cried out, a raw sound of pain that ripped through the quiet street. He staggered, clutching at his eyes, coughing, gasping for air. The pepper spray clawed at his lungs, seared his skin, and stripped away every shred of innocence from the afternoon. Neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by the noise. A woman shrieked from her porch. A man lifted his phone, capturing the unfolding horror. Children on bicycles froze, their laughter cut short. Malik fell to his knees, his palms pressed against the concrete, tears streaming uncontrollably as his body convulsed with pain. Stone loomed over him, radio pressed to his mouth, his voice sharp as he called for backup. "Suspect resisting arrest," he declared, reshaping reality with each word. A friend from the basketball team, still in uniform, sprinted down the sidewalk, his sneakers slapping against the ground. He tried to reach Malik, but Stone shoved him back with a growled warning. The boy stumbled, his eyes wide with terror, powerless to help. Malik, half blind, reached out weakly, his voice breaking through the choking gasps. "I didn't do anything." The scene thickened with the weight of silence, broken only by the click of phone cameras and the hiss of the radio. Stone stood with the posture of a man certain of his power, certain his word would be enough to bury the truth. Yet, beneath that certainty, unease flickered. The crowd gathering on the sidewalks was larger now, angrier. Their murmurs grew louder, pressing in on the narrative he tried to control. Still, he held fast, kneeling slightly to snap handcuffs onto Malik's trembling wrists. It was then that the sound of screeching tires tore through the standoff. A dark SUV rounded the corner at reckless speed, swerving before coming to a halt only feet away. Its engine growled, the headlights cutting across the stunned crowd. Doors flew open, slamming against their hinges, and the driver stepped out with a force that shifted the air itself. The neighbors fell into a tense hush, their phones still raised, their eyes shifting between the man striding forward and the officer who had just assaulted a child. Malik, barely able to see through the burning blur in his eyes, coughed weakly, his body sagging under the weight of exhaustion and fear. His ears, though, caught the sound of shoes hitting the pavement, fast and purposeful, and something inside him stirred, a recognition that brought a flicker of hope even through the pain. Officer Stone, still gripping the boy's arm, looked up at the approaching figure with irritation, then confusion, then the faintest hint of unease. The man's face was etched with both fury and control, a storm restrained only by discipline. The crowd instinctively stepped back, sensing that the real conflict had only just begun. And Malik, chest heaving, whispered a single word through cracked lips as his rescuer drew near: "Dad." The man who stepped from the SUV carried himself with the measured confidence of someone long accustomed to command. His dark suit was tailored but not flashy, his tie loosened from a day spent in meetings that demanded silence, precision, and authority. His name was Marcus Johnson, though those in certain corridors of Washington whispered it with respect reserved for men whose reach extended far beyond what was visible. To his son, coughing and blinded on the concrete, he was simply Dad, but to the world he was Special Agent Marcus Johnson of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a man who had dismantled cartels, infiltrated syndicates, and broken careers of corrupt officials. None of that mattered in this moment. What mattered was the boy on the ground whose face burned from pepper spray and whose small voice had cracked in pain. Marcus reached his son in seconds, dropping to one knee, his hand brushing Malik's shoulder. "I've got you, son," he whispered, his voice low, steady, the kind of tone meant to anchor a drowning soul. Malik turned his head slightly toward the sound, his eyes swollen shut, and released a trembling breath. Relief flickered across Marcus's stern features, but anger rose like a tide behind it, threatening to spill over. He straightened slowly, placing himself between his child and the uniformed man who had inflicted this pain. Officer Bradley Stone planted his boots firmly, his jaw set in defiance. "Step back, sir. This is official police business," he declared, authority thick in his voice. The crowd shifted uneasily, recognizing the absurdity of the order. Marcus's gaze slid to the badge, then to the canister still dangling from Stone's belt, and finally to the boy groaning behind him. "Your business," Marcus replied evenly, "was assaulting a child." He reached into his jacket with deliberate calm and pulled free a black leather case. With a practiced flick he revealed his credentials. The gold shield glinted in the late light, the letters FBI stark and unmistakable. "Special Agent Marcus Johnson," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "You've made a catastrophic mistake." Stone scoffed, the sound half laugh, half dismissal. "FBI? That's supposed to scare me? Around here my badge is the one that matters." His words drew a few gasps from the crowd, but his confidence did not falter. He had built a career on intimidation, on bending truth until it fit his reports. To him, this was another routine encounter with someone he thought he could outtalk, outright, outmaneuver. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His authority emanated not from bluster but from control sharpened over decades. "You pepper-sprayed a minor without cause. You restrained him while he cried for help. And now you're standing in front of federal witnesses, doubling down on lies." His eyes swept across the gathering neighbors, their phones held aloft like lanterns recording every second. "You've already lost, officer. The only question is how deep you want to sink before you're pulled under." Stone shifted uncomfortably, though his expression betrayed only irritation. He tugged at the handcuffs binding Malik's wrists as if to assert control. Marcus moved an inch closer, his body tense, his presence radiating an unspoken warning. The air between the two men thickened, charged with the clash of egos, one fueled by arrogance, the other by a righteous fury that demanded justice. A woman from the crowd stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "I saw the whole thing. That boy didn't do anything." She held up her phone, the screen glowing. Others followed, murmurs of agreement swelling into words of protest. Stone snapped his head toward them, barking, "Back up. All of you back up." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the first hairline fracture in his confidence. Marcus seized the moment. "You can threaten them," he said, his tone quiet but razor-sharp, "but every recording here will end up on my desk by morning. And when it does, I will personally ensure it's forwarded to Internal Affairs, the Justice Department, and every federal prosecutor who still cares about the law." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "You assaulted my son. You tried to rewrite reality. You think your badge shields you, but I promise you, it doesn't shield you from me." The wail of sirens cut through the tension, flashing lights illuminating the street as backup arrived. Patrol cars screeched to a stop, officers spilling out, hands hovering near holsters as they took in the chaotic scene. For a moment, time seemed to teeter. Stone puffed out his chest, gesturing wildly as he called to his colleagues. "This suspect resisted. He attacked me. The father's interfering." His words rushed, desperate, as if sheer volume could bend the truth. But the arriving officers hesitated. Their eyes darted from the boy writhing on the ground, to the phones capturing everything, to the man standing tall with a badge that outranked them all. A murmur spread among them as recognition dawned. Some whispered Marcus's name, their postures subtly shifting, unsure how to proceed. Marcus lifted his son gently, supporting his weight with one arm while keeping his gaze locked on the officers. His voice carried with quiet force. "Get an ambulance. Now." The command was obeyed almost instantly, 2 officers radioing for medical support without hesitation. Stone's jaw clenched, frustration twisting his features as the balance of power slipped from his grip. Malik clung to his father's shoulder, his breathing shallow but steadier now. Marcus adjusted his stance, shielding him from further harm. He turned once more to Stone, whose bluster was thinning under the collective weight of evidence, witnesses, and authority. "This isn't over," Marcus said, his voice low but resonant enough for every ear in the crowd. "You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. And I will make sure you answer for it." The ambulance's siren drew closer, the sound merging with the murmurs of the crowd. Cameras stayed raised, recording not just an act of violence but the moment when that violence collided with consequences. The community that had watched in horror now stood as witnesses, their presence forming a shield around the boy and his father. Stone tried to stand his ground, tried to summon the same menace that had silenced so many before, but something in his posture faltered. His voice, once booming, lowered to a mutter only he seemed to believe. Marcus, carrying his son toward the flashing lights of safety, did not look back. The fight ahead would be long, but the ground had already shifted. Justice, though slow, had been set in motion, and Bradley Stone had just taken the first step toward his own unraveling. Malik lay in the hospital bed, his skin raw and irritated, eyes swollen but slowly healing under the faint glow of fluorescent lights. Machines hummed softly, their steady rhythm a fragile counterpoint to the storm swirling inside his father. Marcus Johnson sat close, his large frame leaned forward, one hand clasped around his son's wrist as if to anchor him. Malik's breathing steadied, though every inhale seemed to remind him of the assault, every cough carrying traces of pepper that still lingered in his throat. The boy's voice was small when he whispered, "Dad? He thought I was a criminal." Marcus closed his eyes, fighting the instinct to rage, and spoke gently, "No, son. He didn't see you at all. He only saw what his prejudice told him to. And for that he will answer." Word of the incident had already spread beyond the neighborhood. Videos shot from shaky hands were now viral across social media, shared with captions demanding accountability. News outlets were circling, piecing together details, while police spokespeople scrambled to contain the fallout. Yet none of that mattered to Marcus in the quiet of the hospital room. His focus narrowed to Malik's fragile recovery and the ironclad promise he had made. Justice would be pursued, no matter how many walls he had to tear down. By the following morning, Marcus was in motion. He filed a formal complaint against Officer Bradley Stone, his words precise and unyielding, each line crafted with the mastery of a man who had spent decades dismantling criminal lies. He also made quiet calls to trusted contacts in the bureau, individuals who owed him favors and understood the value of silence. Within hours, he had secured preliminary access to both body camera footage and internal reports. What he discovered stoked his fury further. Portions of Stone's body cam were missing, as if deliberately erased, the timeline fractured where the worst abuse had occurred. In a conference room lined with grim-faced officers, Marcus laid the evidence on the table. The police chief, a man seasoned by politics more than patrol, attempted to deflect. "It appears to be a technical malfunction. Officer Stone claims the boy was aggressive. He insists he followed procedure." Marcus leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate, carrying the weight of a threat wrapped in professionalism. "Technical malfunctions don't conveniently erase incriminating minutes. And I assure you the FBI's forensic unit will recover every byte of that missing data. If you choose to shield him, you're not just protecting one officer, you're endorsing the rot that infects this department." The room thickened with silence. Some officers shifted uneasily in their chairs, avoiding Marcus's gaze. Others bristled, loyalty to their colleague warring with the undeniable force of the evidence. Marcus pressed further. "You think this can be spun? The world is already watching. Videos from civilians are flooding the internet. Stone's lies are unraveling before your eyes. Protecting him will not save your department. It will bury it." His words struck like hammer blows, each syllable carving cracks into the veneer of authority the chief tried to maintain. Meanwhile, Stone grew restless. Suspended from duty, he spent his hours pacing his house, phone pressed to his ear as he called in favors from old allies. His voice, once booming with confidence, now wavered with desperation. "They're twisting this," he muttered to a former partner. That kid resisted. He did. They're making me into a monster. But even in his own words he heard the weakness, the unraveling of the narrative he had repeated so many times it had almost become truth. Alone, the silence pressed against him, thicker than any courtroom. Back at the hospital, Malik slowly regained strength, but fear lingered. He flinched when nurses entered too quickly, his body tense at the sound of footsteps in the hall. Marcus noticed every reaction, every tremor, and it deepened his resolve. He sat by his son's bed each night, recounting stories from his career, not of violence but of justice won, of families saved, of truth finally breaking through lies. Remember, he told Malik, the law can be bent, but it can also be sharpened into a blade. And I know how to wield it. The investigation intensified as internal affairs launched their probe, reluctantly at first but soon swept into the current of public outrage. Civil rights attorneys joined the cause, pushing for transparency. Stone's face appeared on news broadcasts, framed between headlines of misconduct and abuse. Protesters gathered outside police headquarters, holding signs chanting Malik's name. The city, once passive, was now awake, and the ground beneath Stone's feet trembled with each passing day. Marcus knew public anger was a fire that could either consume or illuminate. He chose to direct it. Through carefully released evidence and strategic pressure, he ensured the narrative stayed unclouded. A boy had been brutalized without cause, a department had tried to bury it, and now the truth demanded light. He refused interviews, letting the facts speak for themselves, but his silence carried weight, the unspoken knowledge that he was a man pulling strings far beyond the cameras. Stone's desperation deepened when he learned the erased footage had been recovered. FBI technicians, working with relentless precision, restored the missing minutes. Malik's raised hands, his pleas for peace, Stone's unprovoked attack. The evidence was irrefutable. In a quiet moment of disclosure, Marcus received the file, his jaw tightening as he watched his son suffer all over again. He replayed it twice, then closed the laptop, the decision solidifying within him. This, he murmured, will end him. The chief of police summoned Marcus once more, this time with less arrogance in his voice. He spoke of process, of caution, of letting the system work. Marcus cut him off. You had your chance to do the right thing quietly. Now it will be loud. The courts will decide, and the world will see every second you tried to hide. He rose from his chair, towering, his final words echoing like a sentence already passed. I don't want apologies. I want accountability. As Marcus walked out of the precinct into the evening air, the city seemed to pulse with restless energy. Reporters clustered at the steps, microphones thrust forward, questions shouted. He said nothing, his silence a shield as he made his way to the waiting car. In the reflection of the tinted window, his face revealed the storm beneath, the weight of a father's fury and an agent's resolve converging into one unstoppable force. Inside the car, his phone buzzed with a message. The trial date had been set. Marcus glanced once more at the courthouse looming in the distance, its stone facade lit by the last glow of daylight. The battle was no longer about reports, footage, or even careers. It was about truth on public record, about forcing a system to confront what it tried so often to ignore. And as he tightened his grip on the steering wheel, Malik's fragile voice echoed in his memory. He thought I was a criminal. The words hardened into fuel, a promise etched into Marcus's mind. In the courtroom ahead, Bradley Stone would face the full weight of justice. Not just the law, but the wrath of a father who had been forced to watch his son suffer. The stage was set, the evidence ready, the crowd already gathering. What began as an ordinary walk home had become the spark of a reckoning, and Marcus knew the real confrontation was about to begin. The courthouse was crowded long before the hearing began, the marble steps lined with protesters carrying signs, journalists jostling for position, and citizens drawn by the gravity of what the case represented. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, every creak of the wooden benches echoing louder than usual, every whisper sounding like a ripple on the surface of a storm. Marcus Johnson sat at the front beside his son, his broad shoulders squared, his expression a mask of restraint. Malik, dressed neatly in a collared shirt and tie, looked older than his years, his posture taut, his eyes betraying both fear and determination. The boy who had been broken on a suburban street now stood at the edge of reclaiming his dignity. Bradley Stone entered flanked by his attorneys, his uniform traded for a suit that did little to soften his hardened demeanor. He walked with forced bravado, his eyes darting quickly to the cameras, then away again. For years, his authority had shielded him, his badge a weapon as much as a protector. Now stripped of that shield, he appeared smaller, though arrogance clung stubbornly to him like armor. He glanced at Malik briefly, then turned away, refusing to acknowledge the boy's gaze. The judge entered, and the room rose to its feet. Proceedings began with formalities, but soon the heart of the trial was exposed. Witnesses were called, their testimonies clear and unwavering. Neighbors recounted how Malik had pleaded, how his small voice had cracked as he tried to explain himself, how Stone had unleashed violence without cause. Video footage was displayed on large screens, the courtroom falling into silence as Malik's cries echoed against the walls. Some in the gallery lowered their heads, others clenched fists in outrage. Stone's defense tried to twist the narrative, arguing procedure, painting Malik as resistant. But every word clashed against the undeniable truth in the footage. When the restored body cam segment was played, the defense faltered. There, in stark clarity, was Malik's surrender, his raised hands, his pleas, his compliance. Then the spray, sudden and brutal, followed by Stone's fabricated shouts of resistance. The image of the boy collapsing under that cloud of chemical pain was unbearable, and the courtroom shifted with an almost audible wave of disgust. Marcus took the stand next, his presence commanding without effort. He spoke not as an FBI agent but as a father, recounting the moment he found his son on the ground, the smell of pepper spray thick in the air, the sound of his child choking. His words were measured, controlled, yet infused with a quiet fury that gripped the room. "I have dismantled criminal organizations," he said, his voice low but resonant. "I have stared into the eyes of men who profited from violence and fear. But nothing, has ever compared to the sight of my son begging for mercy while a man sworn to protect the innocent treated him like prey." His testimony silenced even the most hardened observers, leaving the weight of his grief and resolve heavy in the air. When Stone was called to testify, he straightened his tie and tried to reclaim authority. He spoke with the familiar cadence of a man who had written countless reports, rehearsed countless justifications. "I followed procedure," he repeated. "The boy was evasive. I feared for my safety. I acted as any reasonable officer would." But the words rang hollow, especially when contrasted with the evidence. Under cross-examination, the veneer cracked. His contradictions mounted, his explanations tangled, until finally the prosecutor pressed. "Officer Stone, can you explain why your body camera malfunction occurred only during the moment of your aggression?" His jaw clenched, silence spilling into the room, the absence of an answer louder than any denial. The climax came not with a shout but with a confession unspoken, carved into Stone's collapse of confidence. His eyes flicked toward the jury, searching for sympathy he no longer commanded. The courtroom knew what it had witnessed. The jury deliberated, but the verdict was already etched in the air. Guilty, on charges of assault, misconduct, abuse of authority. The words were read aloud, each syllable striking like a gavel against Stone's career, his reputation, his very identity. As Stone's badge and service weapon were formally revoked in front of the court, he stood motionless, the weight of disgrace heavy on his shoulders. For the first time, his arrogance drained, leaving behind only the shell of a man undone by his own choices. Cameras flashed, capturing his downfall, the once powerful officer reduced to a cautionary figure. Malik squeezed his father's hand as the gavel struck finality. Relief flooded through him, though scars remained beneath the surface. The boy who had been seen as a suspect simply for existing was now recognized as a victim of injustice, his truth validated before the world. Marcus looked down at his son, his eyes softening. "You see," he murmured, "the law can fail but it can also rise. And today it rose for you." Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in chants, some of celebration, others of resolve. Reporters swarmed, microphones reaching, but Marcus guided Malik through the sea of voices with steady purpose. The cameras captured the image of father and son walking side by side, their silhouettes framed against the courthouse pillars, a symbol not just of justice served but of resilience that refused to be silenced. As they stepped into the waiting car, Marcus allowed himself a moment of release, a deep breath that carried both triumph and exhaustion. He knew this battle was only one among many, that the system's flaws would not vanish with a single conviction. Yet he also knew that for his son, for his family, for the community that had borne witness, a line had been drawn. Prejudice had been dragged into the light and defeated, at least this once. Malik leaned against his father's shoulder as the car pulled away, the city's noise fading behind them. "Does this mean it's over?" he asked quietly. Marcus looked out the window, the courthouse shrinking in the distance, and then down at his son. "For him, yes. For us, it's a beginning. You carry your head high, Malik. Never let anyone make you believe you are less than who you are. That's the real victory. The car disappeared into the flow of traffic, leaving behind a courthouse still buzzing with echoes of the trial. For the onlookers, it was a story of downfall and justice. For Marcus and Malik, it was something deeper: the restoration of dignity, the affirmation of truth, and the bond of father and son unshaken by the cruelty of others. The chapter had closed with a reckoning, but the lesson would endure, etched in memory and in the fabric of a community forever changed.